as an educator and a counselor. So we're going to talk about something that's really interesting, because it was only 10, 12 years ago where researchers firmly believed that only external chemicals added to the brain, like cocaine, like heroin, and other things, could actually cause addictive behaviors or changes in brain structure and chemistry that would lead to addictive behaviors. But in the past 10 years, a number of things have shown us how wrong we were, and that some behaviors, there are pathological sexual behaviors, there are pathological behaviors related to pornography, there are other pathologies where the behavior itself starts to drive changes in the brain. And recently, in small studies, but there'll be more of them, we've discovered that the overuse of digital material, particularly tablets, laptops, and cell phones in particular, have an ability to change the brain. There are some very specific limitations. So that I'll tell you right up front, it's not just having the cell phone. No one that I know, old or young, is addicted to their device. If they could get an update on that for whatever iPhone is selling now, if they could get that for free, they would ditch the device in their hand in 1 second and get the new device. So it's not the device, it is often the connectedness that that device provides to others and to the world very often of gaming. So we're going to talk about a lot of that. I'll tell you when we know what a study has found as opposed to what a survey has found. A survey is an instrument that we use both online, 3 ways, on the phone, in person, and online. And surveys ask someone for their idea, their opinion, or declarative truth about themselves. We have no way at all to judge the veracity of those answers. And so a survey is not science and not a study. Nonetheless, we have a bunch of them, and I'll tell you about some of them. So we're going to talk about, the growing problem of smartphone addiction, and you'll start to see in every journal, on little CNN 2-minute blurbs like, Psychologists Today are very worried about today's middle schoolers and their cell phones. They are often survey-based and not science-based. Nonetheless, people are happy to write about it, get a headline, get paid for their article, and some of these you can see what are interesting. So Nomophobia is you don't have your mobile device. So if you don't have your mobile device, nomophobia is fear of being without your smartphone. It affects about 40% of the population. So I would ask people if anyone in here has ever gone out of their house, got in their car, driven down the driveway, gone a mile or more, and said, oh my God, I can't proceed another 2 feet because I have forgotten my cell phone. Just turned around and going back to get your cell phone. Whether you're going to the grocery store to pick something, stopping at the pharmacy, or for whatever 10-minute journey you might have been. Now, don't put your hands up when I ask these questions, because we are filming you. No, we're not. But I've done the same thing. I've driven out and said, how can I go the 22 miles to Indian Lake without that cell phone? When about 17 of those miles has no coverage whatsoever. And yet I turn around and get it. So we are now talking about adolescent populations where more than half say they would not go to a sports camp or a recreational camp that they would have loved to, whether it's horseback riding camp, whether it's out to the Oregon, to Mount Hood, where you can tune up your snowboarding skills in July, because Mount Hood, as part of an active glacier, it has snowboarding all through July, and they run summer camps for snowboarding. And if you could go there free, if the constraint to that wonderful opportunity is you cannot bring your cell phone, more than 50% of them will not take advantage of that wonderful opportunity. So we have some really interesting, can't live without this. Is that addiction? No. But it's distressing change in people's willingness, to go out with a device that for thousands and thousands of years we did not have. And so we'll talk a little bit more about some of these things. So all of these are basically CNN or other articles. Here's a study. Now this is an actual study by taking cell phones away from kids as they took exams. And having them repeat the exam at some other point in time where they had similar questions, not identical, with their cell phone. They all do better when they have a cell phone with them, even if it's in their purse or on the floor, and they're not using it to find the answer to the exam. They're comforted by its presence with them. So we have some really interesting things that are going on here. What is FOMO? Who knows FOMO? Yes.
Fear of missing out.
Fear of missing out, because you may not get to see how beautiful someone's potentially purchased shoes are when they are in a mall somewhere and you're not. And so when you see them and you have to text back to them, yes, you must buy them, so we would miss out on that experience. So we have a really different change now. I'm going to talk a little bit more about some actual brain studies on some of the photographs that show up on Instagram and how people's brains change when they look at them. Those are two studies using actual brain imaging systems to look inside people's brains when they look at various photographs. And self-itis, of course, is the remarkable, almost compulsive need to take selfies of oneself without actually engaging in the environment, the surroundings, the event. Did you hear any songs that this one played? No. But I took 150 selfies of myself during the concert. What's the risk for this mom and her daughter here? with this selfie? Well, you can all see it. Yeah. And in fact, while she was taking the selfie, that bison charged them, and both of them were thrown into the air, and their mother was in the hospital for over 6 weeks. And so give me a guess about how many people have killed themselves by accident taking selfies. What do you think?
1,100.
That's a great guess. It's about 700 right now. And how do they do it? They stand on the edge of cliffs and they back up to take advantage. They're not watching when vehicles are coming. So it's an interesting kind of Darwinian change in our accidental, our ability to have accidental events happen to us. We don't have a record of how many people are hospitalized or injured from selfies, but it's a change that has some really interesting things going on about it. Anybody in here have phantom vibration syndrome? Now here's where researchers who study physiology are fascinated by this change. So where is it that most people keep their cell phone, except those of us who just got a cell phone recently on my 70-something birthday? My wife said, your flip phone is going. But you got me a cell phone so big I'd like to put wheels on it. It's so big, so I wouldn't lose it. Where do most people keep it?
Pockets.
You keep it predominantly in their back pocket on the right side for most people. So, phantom vibration syndrome. I'm not making these things up. Phantom vibration syndrome is where your cell phone alerts you for everything, text, pictures, anything, all the time, and buzzes back here. So researchers are finding, so I'm going to back up against this thing, I'm not going to fall, but researchers are finding that when people back up and the lower right leg brushes against something, and it can be raspberry thorns, it can be something cold, it can be something sharp, that what signal comes to their brain is not that you're backing into sharp raspberries, but they get the scratch or the bite or whatever and reach out and take their phone. Presumably to take a selfie of themselves with it in the raspberries. So that is the first time researchers found out, can the use of this object over and over again, by getting a persistent signal back here, redirect neural pathways to the brain? Because effector pathways are supposed to send you signals all of the time about what is happening on the largest organ in your body, which is your skin. And so you know when it's black fly season up at home or when mosquitoes are out, as soon as one lands off, and as soon as one lands, your brain says, like, something right there, before it gets you, look over there. And now instead you'll have them on your calf. And you'll be like, Who's calling me? Oh, it's the mosquito colony who's calling me. So you have this really interesting first measurable change in some neurological or neural pathways that signal the brain. So we think it's really, really interesting. Technique. So our heads weigh around 8 or 9 pounds, skull and brain together. Our neck column has got pretty good muscles, but it's actually designed to have your head pretty squarely up on your neck column and on your shoulders. Who's had technique? Because I don't even use my stuff all the time, but I have it some days. If you spend your time like this on your device, or even on your laptop or your tablet, at night you'll be like, what is going on? I must have slept wrong. And so you'll be doing that. So we are seeing far more people come into their doctor saying, I did something to my neck and I'm not sure what it is. But we know that that's one of the reasons for it. So if that head is tilted down and your column doesn't get to support it squarely but has to strain to it, usually you'll feel it back here, both sides. You squeeze and you're like, I don't know what I did. You spend 8 hours looking at a screen that was tilted down in terms of your technique. Selfie stomach. Selfie stomach is actually an injury where people inflame the intercostal cartilage that's in your rib cage. So how do you take the best selfie? If you don't happen to own a selfie stick, you extend that right arm as far as you can. So you guys get in the picture with me now, and you actually pull and inflame the cartilage. Now, none of these are life-threatening, but it is an interesting thing for observers to like. Gamer's thumb, you can feel that out. That not only, but I'm not. The gamer's thumb I can see because of overuse. I'm fascinated by how unbelievably fast young people are at texting. Just astounding, and often just 2 thumbs. And so one of my nieces was over with my brother, and he was saying something about like, she doesn't look when she texts. He's like, how do you know what you're saying is right? And she's like, well, I know it's right because I do it all the time. So he had me say a sentence to her and have her, without looking down, text it to him. She was doing 97 words per minute, which is astounding to me, since my best day in high school typing was like 17 words a minute. 97 words a minute with no errors. So I'm astounded by that. That's great dexterity. You can through overuse, particularly because the controllers of game devices are bigger and require more motion. You can have repetitive injuries. So there's a lot that can be happening to people with these things. And we know that some people, in fact, are not in a good relationship with their digital devices, and that's all we're talking about. Are you in control of your devices, or are your devices in control of you? That's what we're talking about. Is your 13-year-old in control of the cell phone that you bought them, that you pay the monthly service fee for, that you are letting them use for their social interaction and communication and learning? Is your 13-year-old in control of that device? Is that device in control of them? Or alternately, are you able to help them be in control of that with the parental controls that every platform invites you to use? And that's what we're going to talk a little bit about tonight also. So we have some really interesting kind of studies here. More time checking, more touches. So people will talk about that I look at my device 85 times, when I'm at my place of employment, or I touch it or take it out or check it 2,600 times. And we are seeing places of employment try to figure out what are the rules for texting, what are the rules for your personal cell phone use. And these are ongoing things. There are unions involved in this. There's employees associations. There's psychologists and social psychologists involved. But I want you to see the chart on the right just for one moment. So this is an actual study. And what an actual study shows us is that if you have your phone on your person and it's with you all of the time, when you get the notification, and I have both the vibration and the sound that someone is texting me, and it may be some advisor from my fantasy football team, or from AARP, or someone, or one of my friends, when you get a notice that someone is texting you, there is what we're going to call hypernatural arousal, so that the dopamine activity when you get the text rises up and you feel momentary, not unbelievable bliss and rhapsody, but a momentary rise in mood state. That can be followed by an actual downturn. Let's look at that one. That can actually be followed by an actual downturn here and here when it is, AARP, or somebody who you let you to get the 20% off on the sale. Not only do you put your email in there, you put your cell phone number in there. And so they'll be texting you like, there's another sale, spend more of your money. And you'll see people not go back to baseline, but be emotionally disappointed when it's not. So we call that rehearsal, hypernatural monitoring, social rehearsal. So when we think about addiction, that's what we talk about a little bit. What we're looking at is there's 9 major characteristics of addiction. We're going to boil them down to 4 things. Is someone so obsessed with that device, as I said, can't leave home, are anxious when they don't have it, overuse it, falling asleep with it in the hand, are using it when they're driving their car, endless use of it, and actually fantasizing if it's being charged, like I wish I could have it back. So there's an obsessiveness about how much time I'm going to spend online. Secondly, is their tolerance. So when we talk about the form of brain change that is most readily measured and documented by brain researchers, we're going to talk about role-playing games. So role-playing games where someone can take on a character, and in many cases have multiple players with them, kids who live in other houses, kids who go to different colleges. My daughter was playing role-playing games with kids at 6 colleges. That when she could do that, do they get used to the game and find it becoming boring? Yes, except all game developers have learned to put in higher levels of challenge. So once you get good at something, you move up to the next level and then your character gets killed. So then you have to have more excitement and more of that. So is there tolerance? Will I need more time and more challenges to get my level of satisfaction? The answer is yes.
But wouldn't this like game design point that you're making, wouldn't that also be present in non-digital games?
Sure.
Is that also like a factor in the?
Yeah, so it is. But here's the difference. If you went to, and I hope you don't, but if you went to one of the casinos that are around, they build in near misses. So that if you need 5 lemons to line up, they will give you 4. It's a computer. It's an algorithm. Yeah. And so the 4th will come down, slow down. The 5th will come down, slow down, slow down, slow down. Then they go right past it. So that is called a near miss. It's so interesting that near miss, I almost won, so I'm going to risk more money, is actually more powerful in driving future tries. Because I almost lived like I almost lived. Yeah. So yeah, it's in both. And of course, a very similar mechanism happens in the brains of compulsive gamblers, who in spite of the losses, in spite of the consequences, who raise the stakes higher and higher, spend more and more money, and do these 4 things. When they can't get to that casino, when they can't get to the game, when they can't get to whatever device they're using, they go through withdrawal. And there's a measurable change in their behavior, and their attitude, and their brain chemistry. And last but not least, we will see people who will continue to use a drug, a gambling device, or in some cases, these role-playing platforms, in spite of the consequences. Check question. Oh, okay, and I'll tell you about some of those consequences. Let me go a little further on and we'll come back to you. Well, I'll tell you a little bit about some of these consequences later when we talk about who has been, fired, who has flunked out of school, who has dropped out of college, who has, in fact, in one case, a 15-year-old boy whose parents shut the Wi-Fi off, You know, because of he was skipping school. He was a smart young man, had been successful right through the 9th grade, started game playing, one of many, many examples that the researchers talk about. And at some point in time was confronted by his parents, "You're not going to play anymore." He said, "Yeah, I am. I don't care." They shut off his Wi-Fi. He came into their bedroom at 2 o'clock, 2 days later, 2 o'clock in the morning, with a butcher knife from the kitchen, and said, "You'll turn the Wi-Fi on, or I'll kill both of you some night soon." And so they didn't know what to do. Eventually, the police came to the house, and at that point went to a residential treatment program to help with that. So are there consequences? Yes, there are consequences. Many major colleges right now talk about the dropout rate of male freshmen. The dropout rate of male freshmen in big colleges like Texas A&M, UMass, where there's just 30,000 or 60,000. The dropout rate among freshman males runs about 38%. Of the 30 who don't come back next year. Now they may come back in 2 years, you know. Of those who don't come back, more than half of them don't come back for 2 reasons. One reason is too much alcohol. You know, all week long, you have 8:30 classes in the morning. Why they still do that, I don't know. So they're not getting up for their classes. They're skipping Monday and Tuesday. And getting in detention, getting arrested, getting in fights, you know, and flunking out or dropping out of college. And in that half who don't come back, the other half are role players who are playing games till 3 or 4 in the morning and not going to class and not doing their assignments and not taking part in the college that they wanted to attend and the college that their parents had paid for at $48,000. So there are some really interesting consequences, mostly not fatal, mostly in fact behavioral consequences. All right, so what did the American Society of Addiction Medicine said? They said, this was about 5 years ago, after these long periods of belief where only external drugs that you put into the bloodstream that cross the blood-brain barrier, only external drugs can cause the changes inside the brain that demonstrate addictive behaviors. But the American Society of Addiction Medicine said, no, the corner is loss of control, the cornerstone, change of mood, tolerance, withdrawal, continued use in spite of consequences. And so so when we talk about various social media applications, they change something called the salience network, which tells us about ourselves. So the salience network you can see here is the anterior insula, the cingulate cortex, and the ventral striatum. And that tells us about our behaviors and whether their behaviors are good or not. So out there on the tables, there are at least 2 bowls, because I surveilled them as soon as I came in, with various candies in them. And so I know better, based on my salience network, to get 12 of those Reese's pumpkin things and take them with me and say, well, I have a long drive, and so I can make up the story for why I need them, you know, but halfway through the 9th one out of the 12, my brain was saying, what is wrong with you? You know, you have chocolate stains on your shirt, you know, you're going to have a stomach ache later on. So one thing that happens with addictive behaviors is the part of our brain that tells us this is going wrong. You need to right this shit, you need to change the behaviors. That part gets shut off. So we're finding out, due to a lot of different things now, oops, here's one of my favorites, a lot of different kind of brain studies that we will see impulsive concept checking on the phone, need to respond immediately to messages or alerts. Listen, how many people in here have figured out that no matter what conversation you're having with someone, when they're responding to a text, you should stop talking? And the reason you should stop talking is not out of consideration, because what you are saying will not, in fact, be able to get into the brain of the person who's reading and responding to text. And we all say, well, I'm a great multitasker. So that's not what the research says. What the research says is multitasking is not the ability to do a bunch of things at once. It's the ability of the brain to shift from task to task rapidly. At the time you're reading the text and formulating your reply internally and then typing it in, physically, and then sending it, you are not going to be able to shift it. And then the person just said, and so I'm filing for divorce and taking everything that you ever owned and running away with my 21-year-old new partner. And they'll be like, what was that? After they're done. So we know that once people start responding to a message, that's why when kids are texting in college, texting each other, or even in high school, you cannot hear what information is being delivered to you and text at the same time. You can catch right up if the phone is not accessible. So all of these things, including excess use that causes conflicts in the family, withdrawing from the family or shared events in favor of your device, and conscious use while driving or in other circumstances are dangerous. So 76% of the kids tell us they have, in fact, texted, read a text. Reading the text is more dangerous than formulating the text. Many of them can formulate the text with one hand on the wheel, two thumbs on the phone, and still look at the road. Reading the text takes your concentration away from the road. So all of that stuff is something that researchers are looking at. And for now, let's talk a little bit about the difference. Surveys are great headlines. It's in this magazine. It's in New York Times. It's in this. Surveys are interesting, but not documented science. I can ask a bunch of people out, why do polls about, and we're going to have an election next month, why do polls about different candidates often seem so flawed? Because they're basically done by surveys. And in surveys, people can decide, I will tell you the truth, I will tell you what I think you would like to hear, I will tell you what I would like to believe about myself, but don't. And so that the response to surveys varies widely, but often has little or nothing to do with the real truth. So someone can say, I never use my phone. I never respond to a text when I'm driving. That's because they know that's the right answer, not because they don't do that. So we don't spend much time, we'll spend a little bit on surveys. We're going to talk more about studies. And we're going to talk about studies that we are hoping, have strong causation. Association is everybody in America who went to a mall 2 years ago was exposed somehow to COVID. There's no way to prove it, but a lot of people went to malls and they got COVID. So you can't prove that, but it's associated with that behavior. Who didn't wear masks? Correlation is, of all the people who went to the mall, 15% came back with COVID. In a closed room with virulent COVID virus and a fan, you can measure through a causation study how far those molecules could travel across a room with a slight breeze. That's a study. And you repeat it, you have somebody else do it, and not just you. You do it in 5 rooms. So we're going to talk about strong causation. Does this behavior cause this? And when it's not strong causation, I'll tell you. Take a look, here's a survey. So this is young adults and kids telling us, when they respond to an online. So listen, the irony of me telling you about surveys, about whether people, about how they use their cell phone, which are all conducted online, does not escape me. Nor does the irony of me telling you later, I'm going to give you 5 sites to look at for good parental controls, and you will find all of them online. Because it is not that these devices are bad in any way, shape, or form. They're remarkable. They're unbelievable. They're life-saving. They're interest-generating. They're income-formulating. They're unbelievable. And anybody who's as old as I am can remember going to Blockbuster and getting a video out. Like I'm driving through the snow. I haven't seen that movie. And driving back. And then it didn't work because you had the VHS thing on it. What was the other one where they would mail you the disc?
Netflix.
No, that was Netflix. It's the early thing. That was the early period of Netflix. And if you lost it, which at my house we lost about half of them, Netflix would start like, well, we're going to send people over there. Send it back, man. We know where you live. And now you can call up any movie that's on, whether you're Hulu or YouTube or Netflix or Amazon Prime or all of the others. You can call up that stuff almost instantaneously to come through your house with the magic of digital communication. They're astounding. They save lives, connect people, help people stay safe, let you send an information. We just had, it was interesting though, Just had 4 young climbers up in the Adirondacks call for a rescue helicopter on their phone. And the helicopter people were like, are you insane? No. How do we know where you are? So then they redirected to the ranger station. They were in a pass. It was way too dangerous for a helicopter to come in. But they were able to get found and get transported out, walking, not on the helicopter, because they had that device with them. And they could not only make the communication, they could track their location. So these are remarkable. It is not at all that they're not wonderful. It is that sometimes we will use them in ways that are not healthy for us. So let's try to talk about some of that. So teens, 50% of the teens in a survey say that, I feel addicted to my phone. Parents, 27%. This is brand new. This is out of Common Sense Media. And again, it's a survey. I will ask you how much time you spend. You will tell me we will record the data. Teens say they spend 9 hours on screens a day. Middle schoolers, a little under 13, say they spend 6 hours a day. Children 1 to 8 years of age, whose parents respond to the survey, are spending about 2.5 hours on screens per day. So does anybody know what the American Academy of Pediatricians says about time on screen before age 2?
0.
0 is correct. 0 is correct. Go ahead.
And then I was about to finish. The American Academy of Pediatrics says over 2 is 2 hours a day.
Correct. And interestingly enough, what they encourage in that over 2 hours a day is, in fact, FaceTime with grandma, or